Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the RAS NAM community session for 2021. I'm Emma Bunce and I'm the president of the RAS. I really hope that you're all doing well and enjoying the conference, and I'm really pleased that we can run this event as part of our wonderful virtual NAM this year. So I'm really grateful to all our guests that we have on screen here today for joining us to provide you with the latest information and views from their various roles and perspectives. We're going to hear from these fantastic speakers who I will introduce properly in just a moment. We're also going to have time for a general panel discussion, and you will be able to post questions through the Q&A, which we will pick up and seamlessly, I hope, and pose to our panelists. If there's time, we'll pick up one or two specific questions for the speakers in between each presentation. So please go ahead and post your questions, and ideally indicate if your questions are for an individual or for everybody. Okay, so this community session today is always really interesting and lively, and usually with many excellent questions. And I think it's a really great example of how the RAS and NAM can facilitate a broad engagement with government, with funding bodies, space agencies, and with other interested parties. So we think this communication is essential, and of course it provides a means for the community to receive the latest news and views, but also for the top people that we have here to hear direct from the community and find out what is on all of your minds. Okay, so I'm going to introduce the panel briefly now. So we have Professor Carole Mundell, who is the Chief International Scientific Envoy for the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, Hiroko Sherwin Professor of Extragalactic Astronomy at the University of Bath, and President of the Science Council. We also have Professor Mark Thomson, who is the Executive Chair of STFC and also a Professor of Experimental Particle Physics at the University of Cambridge. We also have Colin Vincent, who is the Head of Astronomy at STFC, who's present to take any questions in the panel session later. Next, we have Professor Fabio Favata, who is the Head of the Science Planning and Community Coordination Office at the European Space Agency. And then we have Dr. James Endicott from the Open University, and today representing the Space Academic Network. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Professor Carole Mundell. Thank you, Carole.
Emma, thank you, and it's a great pleasure to join you and colleagues today. It's been wonderful to see all of the engagement through this week, and thank you to all the delegates for bearing with us as we've gone through our technical hitches and we've learned more about how to host one of these innovative conferences, and also for the incredible engagement that we've seen on Slack and all of the other platforms that we provided for that interaction. So I'd like to give some remarks to frame the session today from my government perspective as Chief International Scientific Envoy at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. And this year, the Prime Minister has been very clear in his ambition for the UK to be a global science superpower by 2030. And in framing that comment, he recognises the incredible world-leading science and innovation ecosystem that we have. But he also recognises that that is a contested space, highly contested internationally. And so in order to deliver to that ambition, there are a number of key things that we've been doing in government. In January, we published the Integrated Review. This is the most significant strategic review of foreign policy, security, defence and development in a generation. And that integrated review has science and technology and innovation at its heart and threaded throughout all of that strategy. That has now been issued to all of our ambassadors worldwide, and they're using that to engage their interlocutors to help to frame Britain in a global sense in a post-Brexit world. And I know that we'll get on to some deeper discussions about the implications for our community of some of these major changes in our science and technology landscape. But I see these as a very positive and welcome addition to our international outlook. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I speak to our community here about the importance of international collaborations. And really, international collaboration sits at the heart of my work in Whitehall and that of many of our policy teams across government in terms of framing our force for good in the world and also the impact of our science and technology in the world back for UK prosperity and security. And so a number of the strategies that you will have seen or you will start to see coming out of government over the coming weeks and months really have that strategy as a backdrop. And of course, you know, many of you may have gone to the Green Lunch just shortly before this session, the Going Green Lunch. And I think that, you know, sits as a backdrop, you know, some of the global challenges that we have to face, not least of all the existential crisis that we face from climate change. And I know that our community here have been very actively engaged, very early on actually, in engaging not just in terms of climate science, but also that influencing around the climate agenda and how we can all do our part to impact that positively. Of course, we are hosting COP26 in November, and that is a major international conference. Indeed, it brings some of the foreign policy and the science objectives from COP25 and also rolls in COP26 because it was postponed due to the global pandemic last year. And so that is a major piece of leadership for the UK. Again, science and technology sits very much at the heart of our approach there. The other part that I'd like to share with you in terms of my role in government is I head up a network of over 100 science and innovation attaches covering 50 countries, but really with a global reach. And I don't believe that there is any other government in the world that has that kind of network at their fingertips. And many of you may have, or your vice chancellors or your heads of groups may have interacted with our Science and Innovation Network. They're co-funded between BEIS and the FCDO, and we use that network to help to build and enhance our international collaborations. And I know that we also are very active at projecting much of the science that you do on those networks. In order to do that, we have to build on a base of excellent science full of integrity and standards, which is something that the UK is well known for. And our Science and Innovation Network are able to project that excellence and help to enhance our international collaborations. And that really sits at the heart of some of the science diplomacy work that I do that helps to build long-term stable relationships and friendships that are important for our world-leading science. The other part of the strategy that, of course, will be coming out of government will be the innovation strategy, which I know will be very much at the heart of Mark's thoughts as he leads STFC and wider UKRI objectives. And the other part, of course, which I believe is coming out tomorrow, hopefully if things go well, is the government people and culture strategy. And I know that there have been many conversations across this week about culture, about how we make science a welcoming place for a diverse range and lots of diverse pathways into our science and engineering and innovation base so that we can be an inclusive community and really drive that excellence both through our diversity, our inclusion, and the integrity that is required to sit at the heart of excellent science, ultimately so that the public maintain their trust in science and scientists. We've seen that trust be very high in the UK through this pandemic. And again, real testament to the work of our scientists, our engineers, our physicists, our medical scientists across the board, providing advice in through mechanisms like the Science Advisory Group in Emergencies, led by Sir Patrick Vallance, and really looking at the excellence across the UK science space, that interdisciplinary space, people pulling together and refocusing their efforts to tackle this pandemic. And I know that that has impacted many of you, whether you've had access to your labs, whether you've had to put your teaching online. And so again, you know, great credit to the work that you've done to mobilize in this crisis. Again, education sits at the heart of our global offer, and the UK's world-leading higher education sector is well recognised by government. I'd like to turn to how we keep our science excellent, but also how we keep it safe. And so some of the other initiatives that we've been working on in government is about how we keep our open international collaborative culture, but also how we protect the integrity of our scientific base, both in terms of hostile actors and also in terms of the intellectual property pipeline, so that we can maintain the prosperity benefit for the UK and also protect our security without losing the benefits of open international collaboration. And I'm pleased to say that as part of the engagement with the higher education sector, Minister Soloway's formally announced the new Research Collaboration Advice Team, the RCAT, which will now be actually led from BEIS. We will be based out of Manchester. And that's a place where your professional services teams in your universities, your university leaders can actually access advice from government as to how to make sure that the research that you're doing is kept safe and secure without restricting your access to international collaboration so that you can work internationally safely. We also have a similar strategy coming through on the innovation side, and that will engage our business communities. And this again is part of a very integrated process across government. The other part of that integration comes with a new Office for Science and Technology strategy that is being set up in the Cabinet Office. And the Prime Minister announced the formation of a new role, National Technology Advisor. So Patrick Vallance, who's the Government Chief Scientific Advisor, will take that role on. He will now wear two hats. And that's a very welcome advance, because what that does is it produces a real focus in government for science and technology for strategic advantage in the broadest sense. So that we really do have science and technology infrastructures thread throughout government, within government departments, helped and supported by chief scientific advisors, and cohered all the way through to Cabinet Office and up through to the Prime Minister, who will chair the National Science and Technology Council, and that is a cabinet level body. So for me, that really shows that science and technology sits at the heart of government policy and strategy, and the importance with which the government holds it, and in turn the recognition that our communities get through that importance. The other two areas that I would like to touch on, of course, are Horizon. I know that's something that has been on many of our minds as we were going through the Brexit negotiations, both in the work that I've seen going on across Whitehall as we were leading up to Brexit. For many, many years, Whitehall civil servants working very hard to make sure that we could get the policies and procedures in place, but also in our academic community and some of the uncertainty that that's created for our global partnerships and for individuals, for all of us actually trying to navigate that uncertainty. So it was a real pleasure to see that our work brought forward association with Horizon Europe. We're going through the full negotiations now. But the real take-home message from this is please do everything to engage with that programme. We are investing in it. It is there for you to engage with. Use it now and use it well. It's a very important programme, and it acts as a focal point and a linchpin for our wider global collaborations. It's a great programme. The UK does very well in that programme, and I encourage you to continue to put your proposals in and support colleagues, and particularly junior colleagues coming up who may not have the experience as to how to engage with all of those instruments, but please do continue and increase your efforts to engage with Horizon Europe and build those long-term stable collaborations and partnerships. The other part that I wanted to talk about, of course, was talent, because at the core of all of this work are our people. And without our brilliant people and our talented people and that talent pipeline, we don't have a community and we don't have excellent science. And the government recognises the importance that successful research and innovation has to play in the UK's continued prosperity and security. And to that end, the government's fully committed to ensuring that the UK is the best place in the world for scientists, researchers and entrepreneurs to live and work. And recently, the UK government launched a global talent visa. And this enables UK-based research projects to hire the talent they need so that the UK remains at that cutting edge of international research. And these changes are really the first step in delivering on the government's election manifesto commitment to actively recruit leaders in their field to come to the UK. And I know that that global talent visa has been long waited for and long sought by the academic community. And it was very much welcomed when it was launched just before the COVID crisis occurred. And the government will continue to improve our approach to attracting global talent to the UK through the Office for Talent, delivering further visa reform and reviewing our talent offer to make sure that all of our programmes are among the best and most attractive in the world. And I can say from personal experience that, we have taken the messages from the academic community very seriously and helped policy teams to understand some unintended consequences of first drafts of visa reforms. And so that's been a really very, very powerful collaborative piece. Finally, I would really also like to recognise, the Royal Astronomical Society's role in that, just to thank them for their support, particularly with the announcement of the new Caroline Herschel Medal for astronomy. This is a fantastic award. It came together collaborating with the RAS Executive Director, Philip Diamond, and Philip called the prize timely and said that it would fit with the RAS review of their prizes, which will, of course, include assessing how to encourage greater diversity within astrophysics. This is a bilateral award between the UK and Germany. The Prime Minister launched it when Chancellor Merkel came for her visit to the UK at the beginning of July, likely her last visit to the UK in that role as she steps down shortly as Chancellor of Germany. And it really is to recognise and to celebrate and to enhance our UK-German bilateral relationships. And of course, it's a particular pleasure that we were able to announce that shortly before NAM and recognise the importance of Caroline Herschel, both for British and German astronomy, but but also Bath in particular. So that was a real personal pleasure of mine that came through on time. And again, you know, that complements the other awards that the RAS have, and a real recognition. It will be a bilateral award, so it will be turnabout UK scientists and German scientists in both of those countries, and hopefully again enhancing our collaborations between these with this very powerful and important science partner that we have many good collaborations with Germany, to name one country out of many. So I'll close my remarks there. I'm very happy to take questions. I know there's much detail in what I've headlined here, and I'm sure there'll be much lively discussion as we go through this session. Thank you very much, Emma.
Thank you, Carole, for that wonderful introduction to all of the variety of things that you've been doing. Really fantastic to hear many of those things. And I just would like to immediately respond by saying we're very excited by the new Caroline Herschel Medal, and we're, you know, it's a real honour for us to be able to help with this award and administer this award in future, which is really exciting, particularly celebrating excellent women in astrophysics. So we're really delighted about that. Thank you. Some really interesting topics that you've brought up there. I think some of those themes will be coming up in our discussion as we go through. Just to mention a couple that I've sort of also feel quite passionate about. You mentioned the Going Green lunch, and of course, you know, the global challenges that we face. And at the Going Green lunch, there was a lot of discussion about actually how we change our working practices, and I think that's something that we need to discuss, because whilst we can make changes at the RAS, let's say, or at an individual university, it requires change higher up, let's say. So I think that's something that would be really good to have some more discussion about. Also really interested to hear about the people and culture strategy, so I'm looking forward to seeing that, and as we've already discussed, pathways into our community is a real sort of passion of mine, and I know for you too, and I think it's really good that we should be thinking about how our respective organisations can enable the diversity of our workforce in particular to reflect that of wider society. I think I'm rather than hogging the time, I can see there is a question for you. Are you able to comment, Carole, on whether there are any opportunities for the astronomy community in the creation of ARIA?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, ARIA, of course, is a really exciting development. And again, you know, it shows government's commitment to front rank science and innovation. The I stands there for invention. The themes that ARIA will cover are not yet established. The advert for the Chief Executive Officer has recently closed, and the advert for the chair is still open. And so government are just going through the process of filling those roles. And of course, they will be key players in terms of shaping the beginning remit of ARIA. I think one thing that does come out very clearly in the legislation setting up ARIA is how dynamic that body should be, and how very innovative it should be. So, you know, I'm not commenting at all either way on astronomy, but I see that level of innovation and creativity in our community. So I would not see any reason why our community should not be thinking about engaging there. You know, there is not a set agenda yet, and it really is that frontier. It's thinking about, I mean, the equivalent is in the US. It's built on the idea of DARPA, but of course you can see many of the many great inventions that have come out from that frontier blue skies thinking. So I think our community has all the skills at their fingertips. You know, speak to one another, build your collaborations, and then wait for the announcements as ARIA develops.
Okay, that's fantastic, really helpful, Carole, thank you. Okay, I think in the interest of time, we will keep things moving, and I look forward to seeing you later on for the wider panel discussion. Thanks, Carole.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we're going to go to Mark Thomson, who's going to speak to us from his perspective as Executive Chair of STFC. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Emma. Great. I've got some slides. They should be appearing as if by magic. There they go. Great. So, you know, it's a great pleasure to be at this community meeting of NAM. I always really enjoy these sessions and actually greatly value them. I think it's really important to hear, you know, to hear the concerns and the issues facing the wider community. And I think this is a fantastic forum. So what I'll try and do in this talk is just give a bit of a perspective around the funding environment we're working in, and then talk about some highlights and the situation with our astronomy program within STFC. So first, I just wanted to kind of reflect a bit on the spending review allocations and what this means to STFC. And I think the government did a great job, actually, of being very transparent in the allocations process. So all of the science R&D allocation information was published on gov.uk in May. The overall R&D spend across all government departments is 14.9 billion, so a significant investment. And that is dominated by the R&D budget in BEIS, and that's 11.3 million. And this table here just indicates how that budget is broken down. And as I say, you can see that the headline, the dominant part of the budget is UKRI. So it's actually a significant fraction of the BEIS budget, but also the overall government budget. But you also see in the BEIS budget there are other contributions to the Space Agency. And of course, we just have to highlight, obviously, one of the pressures on finances this year was the move of the provision of UK contribution to the EU R&D programs into the BEIS budget. But again, I think we all appreciated the transparency that was there in this round. So of course, then just looking at the UKRI allocation, it's always quite complex. And I thought I'd just highlight a few things. So this top line is the science, our research and innovation budget. That's really the budget where our core program comes from. And what you can see, just as the evolution of that budget across years, and in the last spending review, the 2021 allocation, actually we saw an inflationary increase in that. And then there are a number of other budget lines. So there's a capital bit which bumps around, reflecting just natural changes in spend profiles. There was a significant reduction, as I'm sure you're all aware, in the ODA related budget, reflecting the government's move from 0.7% GDP to 0.5%. So that was a significant pressure on funding at UKRI level. And if you then sum up all of the different numbers, you end up with a budget that actually was somewhat reduced compared to the previous year's budget for UKRI. Particularly, this pressure from ODA was challenging, and as I say, the science infrastructure capital budget kind of bounces around anyway. So it was a challenging, but not, I don't want to be negative about it, because actually the outcome in the end was, I think, quite a reasonable outcome for UKRI. So what did that mean for STFC? So as I say, it was slightly, a challenging place to start off with. So we internally now actually have to then agree a balanced budget. And I just wanted to give you a sense of the process we went through. Firstly, just to say we have a huge number of pressures on our budget, both in our science programs that you'll be familiar with, but also the fact that we're running a large scientific estate and multiple facilities. So what we did internally, and this was both through the executive and STFC Council, we actually came up with absolute priorities, or effectively our internal red lines. And we agreed to prioritise number one, core science. So that really means that flat real increase got passed directly through to our core science programme. We only had a one-year settlement, so we again wanted to prioritise retention of staff. So it was a policy for no internal STFC staff redundancies. And then we protected, to some extent, our operations for facilities, so the Central Laser Facility, Diamond Light Source, and ISIS. But as I say, we had significant challenges around science estates and new initiatives. So we went through quite a tough process inside the organisation. In fact, asked all of our departments to, well, they set the challenge of 5% cuts to resource and 10% cuts to capital. Just to highlight again, some areas such as programs, the bit that deals with the core science program, they were excluded from this exercise, as were our international subscriptions. So what we then did is we went through a process of kind of balancing the pressures that came out of these cuts, what things have been removed internally, and the other existing internal pressures that we had to cover. And we went through a process of internal tensioning and agreed a balance of resources across our internal departments. So this didn't impact the core science program. I just wanted to give you a sense of what we did internally. And the bottom line really for STFC is the FY 21-22 budget is quite challenging, but actually we found a way of managing it. So the outcome, as I say, was challenging, but certainly manageable. So looking beyond the current year, we are now shortly, I think, hopefully, maybe, about to enter a spending review. So we're looking beyond 2021. So the current spending review provides fundings for the Research Council core R&D budgets just for this year and for next year. But the other bits of the UKRI's budget, so you remember I presented a table there, and there was just one part of UKRI's budget was the effectively the science R&D budget, the research and innovation budget. All other bits of that budget, there was only a one-year settlement, so that's all up for grabs. So I think I would kind of again just reflect Carole's sense in her presentation that the government's ambition for the UK as a science superpower is out there, up front in government policy. The ambition for increasing R&D spend to 2.4%, that still remains. So we're working in an environment where science is getting a lot of attention, a lot of positivity about science. Obviously, that has to be balanced against the quite difficult economic situation that the UK finds itself in as a result of the pandemic, and obviously the UK is not alone in that. But there are we think there are clear opportunities there. So we've already, at a UKRI level, started work on the spending review. A number of things going on here. This is just one example. We're developing several themes aligned to some of the government policies. And again, I think it was very helpful that Carole mentioned a number of the recent reviews and strategies that have been published. So integrated review being one. So we're kind of looking at what UKRI does within these particular themes. So one is integrated review, and I'll come back to that later, I think. And one is around transformative technologies, which is very broad, but a clear interest to STFC. Now we're also building the case for infrastructure and digital research infrastructure investments. Again, I think this aligns very, very strongly with government priorities, where infrastructure is a key priority. So we'll see what happens there. But that work is up and running. Actually, just before I move on, I'll just flag one other I think important thing to recognise. The integrated review, which is very, very broad, kind of recognises the importance of the UK engaging globally. So the term science diplomacy, which I'm not a great fan of, but I think we always kind of know what it means, which is kind of engaging with other countries around scientific areas, which is a kind of a safe domain to collaborate. That features quite strongly in the integrated review, and that's I think a very strong link for STFC, because I would say the vast majority of our core science program is international. There's almost nothing we do that doesn't have an international connection. So that's certainly a feature that we're trying to emphasize in the preparations for the spending review, that we are, just by the nature of what we do in astronomy and particle physics and nuclear physics, we are inherently international. So that's just gives you a broad sense of where we are in terms of funding. I wanted to say a few words about infrastructure. And I put this slide in just to give you a sense of this. This was a government investment through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, just north of £100 million. So this is the National Satellite Test Facility, which is about 800 meters from where I'm sitting now at RAL. So this is will be very soon a world-class facility capable of testing the largest satellites. So this is comparable in scale to the best of the rest in the world. So, for example, ESA's STEC Centre. The construction is now largely complete. We're working now on finalising the internal outfitting. There are some photographs here. These are actually a few weeks out of date. This building is incredibly impressive, and if any of you have a chance to come to RAL, and have an opportunity to see inside this facility, it is incredibly impressive. It's a vast building, as I say, to test the next generation of very, very large satellites. So we're actually expecting handover of this building later this year. So that's really, really exciting. The other thing I just wanted to flag was the UKRI Infrastructure Fund. So this is an infrastructure fund that we've been putting together for a number of years now. It's a piece of work I'm leading for UKRI. This really gives you the timeline of the process. So we actually we've been working on the UKRI infrastructure roadmap since the formation of UKRI in April 2018. We published a landscape document, so that's what we've got, and an opportunities document, what we might do in the future. That was published in November. And then we went through a process where council submitted effectively internal funding bids in summer 2020. And I think the thing I want to pull out here, the kind of things we're trying to do in the infrastructure fund is not just say what is it we can build now, but actually to take a more coherent and strategic approach and actually invest relatively small amounts of money in preliminary activities, which could be a design study that might then lead to a very specific infrastructure. So there are two types of kind of funding within the infrastructure fund. We then had an internal prioritization process. So this was run by the UKRI Infrastructure Advisory Committee, which is largely independent experts from around the various communities of UKRI. And then we kind of recommended a portfolio. So this was not a case of recommending a prioritized list of projects. We wanted to avoid that. We wanted to recommend a portfolio of projects that were high priorities across all areas, including the arts and humanities. So that was just pop back. So that's where we got to. And as part of the spending review, the recent spending review, the first investment was announced. So that was very, very welcome. So that was just under a month ago. That was the first 50 million. So it's the first funding tranche of that infrastructure roadmap. Just wanted to give you some sense of what it is, kind of what it's funding. So it's actually funding some preliminary work on large-scale facilities. So these are conceptual designs or technical designs for a number, two very large-scale facilities, ISIS-2, which is kind of the concept for something that won't be built for another 10 years, but you have to start working on it now. And more pressing, actually, is the I won't call it an upgrade of Diamond, it's replacement of the storage ring in Diamond. So that's actually funding to complete the technical design review. But this model of actually awarding preliminary funding to develop, take concepts forward prior to actually committing to the construction, I think is a really, really big step forward. I would also flag that the two STFC projects of relevance to the astronomy community were funded through the infrastructure fund. So this was an uplift to the SKA Observatory to allow the UK to contribute at our agreed level. This is just the first year of a proposed uplift, so it's a significant amount of money on top of a significant amount of money. And the first tranche in an investment in digital research infrastructure. So that was actually £5 million to STFC, covering a number of areas. So this is AI for our facilities, Dirac is our supercomputing for theory, and then there's also Jasmine X and Iris developments. So that was very, very welcome. But this, as I say, this really is the start of a process, and it's not just about kind of the kind of current investments in projects. It's really enabling our scientific communities to engage. So there was a small amount of funding awarded to a neutrino experiment in Japan, or our communities, and this is really to allow the UK community to continue to engage with the possibility of becoming a partner in the future. It's not a commitment to join, but it's to maintain that engagement. And similarly, we awarded some preliminary funding for scientists to engage in the electron-ion collider. So this is a project to collide, well, it's electrons and ions that will happen at Brookhaven in the US in the relatively near future. So they're kind of going through the conceptual design phase at the moment. So again, it's allowing our communities to engage. Another example of using this kind of idea of preliminary funding. Again, it's not a commitment to join. So actually, this is really positive news for STFC, because a lot of this stuff here, we either wouldn't have been able to do, or it would have to somehow be a part of our tension against our core program. So extremely welcome. The caveat here is this is just a one-year commitment at this stage. All of the rest is to play for in the spending review. Okay, so a few highlights from our program. Really, I think it's a really exciting, obviously, results from the dark energy survey, kind of the hints that there might be something not quite right with our current understanding. So, and again, I think this just highlights, the importance of STFC supporting, the UK in addressing, scientific excellence and tackling actually some of the really biggest questions in physics. So not just astronomy. So that was I had to just flag that, because it's obviously I come from a particle physics background. So this type of observations there, they really are at the boundary between all of our fundamental sciences. Again, a real big highlight this year, and this has been kind of very high on my agenda for the last 3 years, and we've been working with colleagues in South Africa and Australia in getting to the point of actually setting up the new IGO for the Square Kilometre Array now Observatory. Lots of good news here. So China recently completed the ratification of the treaty. France has now agreed to fully join the partnership. There are a number of other countries that are in very advanced stages. But perhaps the most important thing is at our council meeting in June, so again quite recently, we agreed to start the phased construction of SKA. And also, equally importantly, ahead of that agreement, we had to get government approval to commit to the UK's contribution for SKA, and that includes the uplift from the infrastructure fund. So that's great news, and we're now at the stage where UK R&D groups, university groups, and in collaboration with industry, are actually submitting proposals for the first in-kind contracts around software development for the advanced fairly near front-end software. So really exciting, and just to note that the construction of the SKA started on July the 1st, so this is now a construction project. So it's absolutely brilliant news. We managed to get to this point. I was going to say relatively quickly, but it's obviously not relatively quickly. But actually, from where we were, say 3 years ago, things have moved really rapidly, and it's great news, not just for astronomy but for global science. Also, other good news. Obviously, ESO is high on STFC's priorities and the astronomy community's priorities. There are, just to give you a sense of the status, the facilities at Paranel, Lucila, and the ALMA Observatory, they are partly operating. Not surprising, there are continued issues with travel as a result of the pandemic. Things are not helping. The ELT site, the work there has not yet fully restarted, but the contractors are kind of actually undertaking prep work. The work on Harmony obviously is kind of really important here, but METIS and the work towards MOS and HIRES, these have been delayed, but we're working with the project office and the various teams to minimise the impact. So delays are inevitable due to the pandemic. I'm challenging, but we'll get through that. There were also delays to moons. But this has now gone through a process and been reapproved at a new cost and a new end date to better reflect exactly where we are now. So the test and acceptance phase risks. But actually, I'm again having seen the progress on the actual the cryostat and the focal plane at UKATC. There's been a lot of progress, but there are also a lot of challenges there, and in putting this project together, particularly at this time. We're also we've done a number of impact studies. So we did an impact study of CERN, for example, which was really helpful and really helps us go to government and say why invest in big science. We're doing that now for ESO, and ESO also is going to publish an updated strategy later this year. So a lot going on at ESO. ESO related despite the pandemic. Now again, just to say that we're not standing still with astronomy. Obviously, we have had a flat being an inflationary budget, but we are continuing to support new activities. So we are supporting the Liverpool John Moores University, so supporting the investment in the new robotic telescopes. This is the 4-meter survey facility on La Palma. Again, so this is really highlighting the time domain. So that's, I think, an exciting development. Supporting CUBES, which is a new instrument for VLT. Again, that's led by UKATC. And obviously, everybody's aware of the excitement around the Winchcombe meteorite. So we were actually able to act rapidly and urgently to issue an award to really enable a rapid analysis of the meteorite led by a Natural History Museum. So again, it's a really exciting and fairly unique opportunity to sample the early solar system. So we were able to move quickly on that, which I think is fantastic. And we've also gone out and interviewed for 2 Webb Fellowship positions. So these are really to exploit the science and outreach aspects of the JWST launch, which is obviously coming up towards the end of this year. So actually, despite challenging budgets, we're not standing still, and we're able to continue to do new stuff. in parallel with supporting science preparation for various space missions, including BEPI, Webb, Ariel, Euclid, and that list goes on. Worth just noting something about Weave. So Weave has been in development for a number of years. So I kind of remember reviewing this when I was chair of the PPRP many years ago. The good news, though, is it's now arrived at the Isaac Newton group of telescopes on La Palma. So this is a new spectroscope, for the William Herschel telescope on La Palma. So this is now being commissioned on island in preparation for mounting on the telescope. Some of these aspects are being tested remotely, for example, the robotic positioners. But this is really good news. It's been a long time in development. And there have been delays again due to the pandemic, but still moving forward rapidly. So this is going to be I think a really interesting project, both in terms of dark energy, looking for evidence for dark energy, but there's also many, for following up on discoveries emerging for the absolutely amazing Gaia imaging surveys of the stars in our galaxy. So that's really positive news. Again, just to talk about astronomy grants. So the 2021 round is out for review. A very large number of projects in more than 20 consolidated grants. As always, this includes new groups and new applicants, which I think expresses the health of the field of astronomy in the UK. And the Astronomy Grants Panel has agreed again to meet virtually and continue the way they sifted last year. But again, slightly increased focus on adding feedback to the applicants. I want to highlight this because I think it's really important that 43% of the Astronomy Grants Panel are women, including the chair. So this is something that STFC is trying to push across all of our panels. The important ones such as the Astronomy Grants Panel, but also the lower level panels. We are really championing gender balance in all of these panels because it's well, obviously it's the right thing to do, but I think it's really absolutely important to get that diverse thinking in the way we get advice and receive advice on funding. You're probably aware we've also had a review of consolidated grants. So there was an internal review for our panels. And this review came back and recommended a move to offering two types of grant awards, so large consolidated awards and individual more responsive awards. We then had an implementation panel to try and give us some advice of how we can actually implement something like this. And it was felt that this looked across not just astronomy, but this possible mix of consolidated and individual awards was really only likely to work in astronomy in the near future anyway. And the main issue is obviously doing something like this is finances in a flat environment. So this implementation panel recognised that there's lots of good stuff here, but actually the implementation is going to be challenging. We're certainly not going to rush this out, and this won't take effect until the 2023 round at the earliest, unless the spending review results in a significant uplift in funding. Now we're also we need to work with the UK within the UKRI framework for awards. And agree a preferred method for demand management. There's a lot of desire to harmonise across UKRI, but actually, interestingly enough, there's quite a lot of interest, certainly at the top level in UKRI, in the way STFC actually provides funding to our communities through kind of a mixture of responsive mode grants, but actually the more longer term consolidated grants that enable stability. So I don't see this as a threat. I think actually this is an opportunity for UKRI to benefit from some of the good practices we adopt within UKRI. Just to flag, talent skills really important. So Carole again talked about the people and government people and culture strategy. I mean, this is an area where obviously high focus of UKRI. Support for early career researchers is part of our core strategy. We have to do this, and we want to do this. And this is an area I would say where we're in a really good position at the moment. The opportunities there have grown since the creation of UKRI. We have Ernest Rutherford fellowships, our normal internal STFC fellowships. There are the Stephen Hawking fellowships, which is a joint EPSRC and STFC scheme around theoretical physics, but obviously relating to the areas of science of interest to Stephen Hawking. That second round is currently going through review, so that's another opportunity. And this, as I say, this is a joint EPSRC and STFC call. The first round, I can't remember the exact breakdown, but the balance certainly was swung towards the STFC science areas. So again, lots of opportunities. There are the UKRI Future Leader Fellowships, which are well known now. Round 6 is in peer review. I wasn't sure how this would actually play out, whether this would be how it would work for our particular field, for astronomy, particle physics, and so forth. But I would say STFC early career scientists have done really well out of this scheme. So it's really, really pleasing to see. And there are also the Daphne Jackson Fellowships. Really, these are looking for scientists and how they return, particularly returning from career breaks. So lots of opportunities there for early career scientists, which I think is absolutely fantastic news. Just to flag a couple of other things that each summer we invite bids for short courses, summer schools for STFC funded students. And again, we try and engage with our early career researchers, encouraged to participate in these schools either as lecturers or tutors. So just to flag that is still out there. The other thing I think was worth flagging is both at the UKRI level and the STFC level, we want to recognise the breadth of roles that contribute to research and innovation. And last year we published an action plan or multiple action plans for the Concordat to support career development of researchers. And we, both at the UKRI level and STFC, actually was slightly ahead of the game there, actually signed the technician commitment. I think technician commitment is a really, really positive initiative. And in fact, this is, for STFC, this is, many of our internal staff fall into the category of technicians. I attended a webinar run by them yesterday around their action plan built on the technician commitment. And again, it's a fantastic initiative focusing on essential part of the research and innovation system. The other thing just to flag, as you know, the UK space strategy is out there being developed, a very high priority for the government, UK strategy for space. STFC and our communities have lots of interest in space, obviously, so we have directly interest at RAL Space. I mentioned the National Satellite Test Facility, we have UKATC, but then of course there's the science programme, and our core science programme, a significant part is of course space-based science. We also do a lot around innovation at our campuses, so there's a Catapult, the ESA XSAT Centre, and our cluster of space businesses, over 100 of them now. So what we've been doing in the process of developing the UK strategy for space is really emphasising the role STFC has, and actually more broadly the role that UKRI has and what we can offer. So we've provided inputs at various levels to the national space strategy. I think that's been positive. Also providing input to the House of Commons Science and Technology Committee on UK space strategy. The other thing we've been doing at an STFC level is we've been strongly engaging at a very senior level with the new BEIS space policy team and the new MOD space teams as well, because I think it's as the landscape is changing, it's really important to make sure that our interest in the science and what we can actually offer in terms of capability are recognised. And just to say, it's not, there've been other important inputs into UK space strategy. I just flagged a few here, partly through the Space Academic Network, and also with the RAS working group, and that's involved kind of interestingly, actually, kind of the issues around satellite mega constellations, both for optical and radio astronomy. So really here we are really focusing very much on highlighting what we have to offer within STFC and our community. So that's both fundamental research. The thing we're really keen, it's a very sensitive keyboard I've got here. Early stage technology R&D is something we would like to do much more of. around skills, a number of initiatives there, and also commercialization of space, working with industry. So we're obviously looking forward to working with the new UK Space Agency CEO, Paul Bate. I think I'm meeting with him on the first time in a couple of weeks' time, and then we have a broader engagement between STFC and the agency in a few months' time. So lots happening there. Also, just to highlight, this is really around the science vision. So obviously you're aware of the Astronet initiative, the development of the new European science vision. Now, I think it's fair to say that the pandemic has proven challenging. Nevertheless, the process of going through the consultation on the science drafts, many responses, that's been completed, and there was an EAS webinar, many registrants there, and gave good engagement from UK scientists. So this work is not complete yet, and if anybody wants to ask, Colin will be on the call later, just to, obviously playing a leading role in this. But there are holes, and there are a couple of sections around computing and skills and sustainability that are still draft. There's a new section that's been added on extreme astrophysics, so I think this is interesting because that kind of provides the link to the particle astrophysics community, and there's going to be further consultation hopefully taking place from August, with the aim of publishing. It says not before the end of 2021, but hopefully it's not too long after the end of 2021. Finally, I just wanted to flag something around the STFC advisory panels. So as I said, we awarded the first tranche of the infrastructure fund, which went through the 2020 process. Just worth noting, the 2021 process is now underway. We don't anticipate putting much forward to this, because I think the big stuff we put forward was the first time, but we are considering projects that are kind of already in the system, and those which are known to be priorities guided by advice from Science Board and Council. But the point I really wanted to emphasize here, what we want to do is really use the infrastructure fund to fund high priority projects in the future, and here we need community input. So the advisory panel roadmaps are, I think, absolutely critical in this process. So both the Solar System Advisory Panel and the Astronomy Advisory Panel, they are commencing work to refresh their roadmaps, and that will provide guidance on future investment choices. So I think this is really important. So I'm really encouraging colleagues to sign up to the relevant mailing lists, get the maximum community involvement in this area. It's really is important. And just to flag the update of the roadmap from the Solar System Advisory Panel. The first deadline for the questionnaire and white paper submissions has been extended, but is coming rapidly. That's 31st of July, and a complete review of the roadmap for solar system research that will be presented to our Science Board later this year. So that the last full review was back in 2015. Again, some links here that you'll be able to access later. But just to emphasise, 41 white papers have been submitted so far, but the advisory panel would certainly like to see more inputs. I think interestingly, they're highlighted they'd like to see the inputs from a range of career stages, job types, and disciplines. So again, the link is out there to provide input. Finally, I won't say much more. Just the outlook. Government funding. We don't know what's going to come from the spending review, but I would like to echo Carole's positive sentiments at the beginning of this meeting. The ambition is still out there. The science, UK as a global science power is out there. That has to be positive. As I say, the spending review is likely to be in the autumn. We haven't had formal confirmation of dates yet, but this really is an opportunity to support the wider UKRI research and development programme. This spending review is going to be incredibly important for science. All of the strategies that have been published really give us an opportunity, and we'll see what comes out of it. But I think this is a particularly important spending review, and I think it will set out the government's longer-term ambition for science. And of course, the outcome will then define the level of ambition for our core science programme and beyond. And finally, I don't think I've ever given a presentation to one of these meetings or similar meetings where I've said it's uncertain times, still uncertain times. There are reasons to be positive. As I say, the funding situation we find ourselves in this year, challenging, but actually, manageable. And, we managed to protect the core science programme. there are reasons to be positive. Not only the government's focus on science, but also hopefully now anyway, including the gradual easing of COVID restrictions, which will have an impact on our science programme, which the current restrictions have led to some multiple challenges, including to delays in some of our big projects. And I think that's all I have. So I'm happy to. Don't know what I do now. Do I stop sharing?
You can stop sharing. That's great. Thanks very much, Mark. That was a really fantastic update from STFC, and we always appreciate you coming along to our sessions and talking to us about all of the detail of what's going on at STFC and all of the positive programme highlights. I always am very happy to see those as part of your presentation too. It's good to celebrate the successes. There's a few questions coming through, and some of them I think are possibly more general, so I'm going to shift those towards the panel session a little bit later. But a couple of things, just I think we have time, that are more specific for you, if that's okay. One question is specifically around STFC PhD students were disappointed by the support and poor communication by UKRI during the pandemic. Has STFC looked into the long-term career effects for disadvantaged ECRs? This is something that's been on a lot of our minds. I mean, this really is a long fraction of a PhD, isn't it? So
it is. STFC is not doing this specifically because this is really a UKRI issue. It's not just for STFC. There may, I won't argue whether STFC's areas have been disproportionately affected or less affected in one way or another. This was incredibly challenging, and UKRI obviously worked to provide additional support. The additional support that was provided in terms of finance, the actual finances, was really significant, and it would be very hard for UKRI to have done more. The communication. I felt the communication actually was not. The initial communication I thought was reasonably strong, but then as things progressed, I think it became more challenging, particularly as it was clear that the cost of the pandemic, and that includes the extensions, was becoming increasingly challenging just in terms of the budgets. So we are at the UKRI level looking at the impacts. There is no easy answer to this, unfortunately. I wish there was. Clearly, the pandemic has impacted. It's impacted everybody, given the way we're sitting today as well. And I think all we can do at STFC level is try and do the best to mitigate individual cases where we can. But there are no easy solutions. I wish I could give you a better answer for that.
No, it's very difficult, and I think, as you say, I think the point is that STFC and others, we all need to monitor and support those early career scientists as they go forward into their careers, and it's been an incredibly difficult time for as you say, for everybody, and I think postgraduates have had a very challenging time indeed, and I'm saying that as a head of a physics department. So indeed. Okay, thank you for responding to that. And then just a comment, which is around it's fantastic that the grants panel has 43% women, including the chair. And just a question around considerations of other types of diversity as well.
Yeah, it's a good question. We are trying to improve. The challenge here actually is gaining the data. So in terms of other types of diversity, quite a large number of people tick the box. They're not willing to answer that question. So it's very hard for us actually to track that. We would like to do so, and there's a big push, not just across STFC but UKRI, really to try and effectively get better data. That's the first step. So at the moment, there's a desire to do that. We just don't have the data at the moment. That goes not only for our grants panels, but actually for all sorts of aspects of recruitment across internal recruitment across the organisation. But yes, it is important. It is important, and we're not ignoring other types of diversity.
Thanks, Mark. I think that's an issue that we see across many areas. It's collecting that accurate data, and certainly what we don't want to do or be doing is making any assumptions. So it's very important to get accurate data. Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. And I'll see you again a little bit later for the panel discussion. And next, fantastic speakers keeping perfectly to time. Next, I'm going to bring in Fabio Favata from the European Space Agency. Hi, Fabio. Over to you.
Emma. Thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for attending. I will be briefly illustrating to you our new long-term plan for European space science in the European Space Agency in our science program. And let me just begin by recalling the glorious past and present for which we are standing. We have a large number of missions in orbit, covering lots of places in the solar system, doing lots of astrophysics in different ways. And so any new plan really must stand on the shoulders of giants. And just to illustrate how this plan is very innovative, but has lots of continuity, let me recall on the solar system side, two key missions that have really changed the way we do science in Europe, space science, and those are in just in order of time: Huygens on board the Cassini spacecraft, and Rosetta, the cometary probe. I mean, Rosetta was the mission that really put European space science on the map with the broad public. It was the first mission for which a taxi driver asked me, "Oh, you work for ESA? You're the guys who did Rosetta?" And it was a world first. It was absolutely fantastic that we could land a small probe on the rugged surface of a comet, a place nobody knew what it would look like. So just designing the probe was an amazing challenge. And you can see here on the right-hand side where there is a little circle where 3 years after the event, the probe was actually located in one of the images, stuck into a little crevice. But apart from doing wonderful science, this mission really put us on the map with the great public. But well before that, as all of you know, because it was a big UK role, we did Huygens. And I never tired to say to people that we, Europe, landed on the farthest away body in the solar system, Titan being on average, and of course this changed with the orbit of the planets, on average some 50 times farther away than Mars. So yes, Mars landings are great. Yes, they get lots of press, but we did something which is, I would claim, at least as challenging some significant numbers of years ago. Unfortunately, that didn't get the same public visibility as Rosetta. And we are continuing to do amazing planetary missions, planetary science missions. We recently launched Bepi Colombo. This is a composite graphics where you see a view of Mercury, where Bepi Colombo is going, the antenna and solar panels of the spacecraft moving and deploying, and etc., etc. Another world first and a gorgeous example of international collaboration, given that it's a 3 spacecraft mission, one of which is actually built and provided for by JAXA, with whom we're working together closely. I mean, in astrophysics, again, we have done and we do and we will do lots, but let me just identifying again, because this is really the present and past on which we're building for the future, 2 themes. One is the Gaia mission, a unique European first and expertise, but the other one is exoplanets, also to show how a bottom-up process can produce a coherent approach to scientific challenges. And exoplanets were discovered in Europe by, as you all know, by Michel Mayor and his then student Didier Queloz. And this even led to a Nobel Prize, shared the Nobel Prize for Physics in 2019. So I would say Europe certainly is second to none in terms of priority claims on the exoplanet science, which has become more and more of a dominating science team among the students. Students are voting with their feet, choosing exoplanets more and more as a team for their PhDs. And we in ESA, if you look at it closely, really have a whole team represented by a number of missions. Apart from Europe, having the ground-based observatories through which exoplanets were first discovered, and being a partner in Hubble, which has been the first protocol for space science on exoplanets. But then Europe did the Carole, originally the first transit survey. And then we shouldn't forget Gaia, whose exoplanet bounty is still to come, because it concentrates on the long period exoplanets that will require the longest possible baseline in time. But Gaia will produce a unique set of exoplanets, long period, far away from their parent star. And then we've launched the Cheops, a small mission, which is doing a transit photometry at an unprecedented level. But then we have 2 dedicated exoplanet missions in the work in different stages of development, Plato more advanced, and Ariel just started its development. And in addition, it is thanks to the European partnership with NASA on James Webb that European astronomers will have access to a tremendous resource for exoplanet science. So this is just to say that, yes, our bottom-up process may appear as, let's say, driven by community whims, but in fact it does produce very coherent outputs depending on what the key science themes are at any given moment. Just to also, just to illustrate Gaia, again, European, absolute European first, no other spacefaring power has attempted the global astrometry, and Gaia is an amazing mission. Just the numbers on the bottom right-hand side, we're talking billions. The number of measurements, the number of stars for which we're getting accurate stellar parameters and so forth is simply amazing. Anchoring, prior to Gaia, we just had a handful of accurate astrometric measurements in the optical of extragalactic sources to which to anchor our reference source. Now we are in the millions. Again, a unique mission, uniquely European, a unique European technology, and world-leading in its area, as well as foundational for astronomy. There will be a before and after Gaia. I think the success of the program is evident. If you want to take one single metric that, of course, you use to rate individual researchers is papers, scientific productivity. And this plot shows the number of refereed publications per year using results from a given mission. And you can see, A, that this number is big, B, that has been rising dramatically thanks to Gaia. Gaia is now accounting for almost half of the papers produced from ESA science missions. I do predict that this number will go down from Gaia, not because the mission will become less important, but because people will simply start using the data of Gaia without quoting it. You no longer quote, cite the read-repair catalog if you use an HD number in your paper, and the same will eventually happen with Gaia. But you can see that the ESA science mission are responsible for between 10 and 15% of all the papers produced in the world on astronomy, astrophysics, and planetary science, which I think it's a pretty good return on investment. Now, let me go to the future. All those results are great. We have 3 great missions in the making, and those are JUICE that will go to Ganymede, will do, again, a world first orbit in Ganymede. We have Athena, largest X-ray observatory ever built, and LISA, first gravitational wave observatory to be ever built, plus a number of smaller missions. I mentioned the 3 big ones. Athena and LISA will be launched around the mid-30s, which means it's now high time to start planning the future, to start deciding what we will do after Athena and LISA. And this means missions that will fly in the 2040s and 2050s, which means a horizon which certainly for me is way beyond my professional lifetime, possibly my biological lifetime. The people in the audience, the ones of you who are students, PhD students, early career researchers, will be the one that will actually benefit from those activities. So we did a large community consultation and put together a senior committee supported by a very broad segment of the community, and I will get to that in a second, and gave them a clear mandate to, based on a call for a white paper that we ESA run to the community, they should recommend us 3 science teams for 3 large missions following Athena and LISA. So very clear recommendation. We asked them to identify potential high-impact science teams that could be implemented through medium missions, but those are not prescriptive. Medium missions will continue to be selected through an open process. And then also tell us which technology we should look at for enabling in the future time frame after Voyage 2050, innovative missions that are simply not possible today because of technological limitation. They worked for a couple of years. It was really not an easy work, in particular in COVID times, but they came with three very clear recommendations, three themes for the future. One is the icy moons of the giant planets, actually moons of the giant planets. Another one is a more complex theme, and I'll get to that in a second, that spans temperate exoplanets all the way to the Milky Way. And then the third one is the new physical probes of the early universe. They also gave us very clear technology recommendations that we should invest and work together with the member states in cold atom interferometry as an enabler for more precise, previously impossible measurements, very high resolution X-ray imaging, TBC weather interferometry is the right tool because the goal is the imaging, not the interferometry. New power and heat sources enabling for planetary exploration, and also with possible forays into cryogenic sample return, and then new ways of propulsion, new means of propulsion to get either very far from the solar system or a very high heliospheric latitude and so forth. As I say, it was a big exercise, but it was completely community-driven. It was a completely bottom-up exercise. Took more than 2 years of effort, should have been finishing earlier, but the impossibility of having face-to-face meeting led people to have many more and more frequent Zoom calls as opposed to a few days together in a given venue. So it took more than 2 years. The senior committee was composed of 13 European scientists, was led by two co-chairs, Linda Tacconi from the Max Planck in Garching, Max Planck Institute in Garching in Germany, and Chris Harridge from University of Lancaster in the UK. They did an amazing job, and I really would like to express my not my personal gratitude, in addition to my personal gratitude, our ESA's institutional gratitude for the effort they made. Their work was based on 97 white papers that were submitted in response to the call, with a total of almost 3,000 scientists. So I think that this really is representing the broader community. And then we had an open call for membership in the topical teams that prepared the work of the senior committee, where we had, again, more than 200 applications, broadly representing the community, and the selection of the topical team membership had a strong emphasis on young, early career scientists. This exercise was not done in isolation. We were very keen that this could be done with a strong link to the worldwide landscape, which means ground-based astronomy. And ground-based astronomy in Europe is mainly, but not only, ESO. Of course, we heard earlier in the session about the progress of SKA and so forth, so that was also obviously kept into account, but also our partners are the other space agencies in particular, but not limited to NASA, also including our partners in Japan, in China, and et cetera, et cetera. So it is really an exercise that defines Europe's priority in a broad worldwide context. The criteria for selecting the teams, for deciding upon the teams, were four. Those were adopted by the senior committee. Of course, we should have scientific breakthroughs. That's why we are here. That's why we're doing the science. The missions should be feasible now, but they shouldn't be performed. The science shouldn't be performed through other means, by other missions, by other facilities before. They should be feasible technologically wise, and they should be affordable. There were, unfortunately, it's an embarrassment of riches, plenty of ideas that would be great, but would require a significantly larger budget that we can count on at the moment. JUICE, we are going to be the first space agency ever to orbit the moon of a giant planet with JUICE around Ganymede. And it's an amazing, interesting team because each one is a world on its own. I think the interest has been particularly, how can I put it, raised by the discoveries of Cassini and Huygens around the moons of Saturn, and for example, Enceladus and its jets, which you see in the bottom left-hand side of the picture, the fact that those are far from being dead worlds, and they can actually spew water vapor and whatever else, other substances in space. It means there is an ocean, and an ocean means there's lots of potential interesting things. Life is the first that comes to mind. Of course, that's very difficult to actually detect, but certainly those bodies, those worlds deserve to be explored in detail. And so the mission should really look into the issues of habitability and biosignatures, and it really should build on our world's first landing on Titan and orbiting Ganymede. And of course, people would love to do an in situ mission with a lander or even a sample return. Those are too ambitious for the ESA science program as of today, and that's why we are concentrating on a mission that will focus on an orbiter and will not very likely have a lander. Then the second theme, as I said, is a multiple one, because of course exoplanets, as I mentioned before, are very close to the top of the interest of the scientific community, and really, it would be fascinating to characterize a temperate exoplanet. It would be a real breakthrough. At the same time, also having a Gaia-like mission in the near infrared, allowing us to probe the obscured recesses of the galaxy close to the center, star-forming region, and so forth, would also be transformational. Ideally, we would love to do both of those missions. The senior committee felt that if, and there is a big if in terms of affordability and technology, if we could make a mission in Europe, led by Europe, that could measure the spectrum of the thermal emission from a temperate exoplanet, we could be answering amazing scientific questions, in particular about whether there is water on the surface, whether there are biomolecules in its atmosphere that can be detected, and so forth. This would be a huge European priority. However, we know that it can be done, but we know that it's possibly very expensive and possibly more expensive than we can afford. So affordability is a big issue on this one. And that's why they also selected the second team and we should choose between the two of them in due time, between an exoplanet mission and a Gaia in the infrared, because also Gaia in the infrared would really be transformational. It would allow us to look in the central regions where stars are very dense, which we simply cannot see because of dust obscuration with Gaia, and also look at the very red stars in the faint outer parts of the galaxy to look at sites of star formation. So it would be also an amazing mission, which would build on the leadership that we've built on Gaia. So we'll study both teams, will study both mission concepts, and later on make a choice based on what can actually be achieved, affordability, and therefore prioritize which mission should be built. Finally, the physics of the early universe was considered of high priority, and the questions, I was going to say obvious questions, because they are so natural that one wishes to ask them about how did the universe begin and how did the first structure form and evolve, the first black holes, and so forth. It is really the young universe around ionization and the first couple of billion of life of the universe, which is really key in the science team. And of course, we're doing lots. JWST will be an amazing mission from this point of view, but one would also like to probe earlier and probe things that cannot be seen by JWST. And for this, the senior committee identified at least 2 probes, and possibly more, but the 2 that have been identified are gravitational waves in a band which is very different, a frequency band different from LISA, that would allow to look at early structures, at very early structures. So building on LISA's, on the leadership will build on LISA and looking farther away in time. That's one possible probe. The other possible probe is building on our LISA leadership with Planck and studying really the very minute fluctuations of the cosmic microwave background and its polarization. And this would really allow us to look at processes very early on in the life of the universe. Once more, ideally, one would love to build both missions. It's not going to be feasible. Therefore, we'll have to make studies, consult the scientific community, and then move on with one of the missions. So it was a really big community effort. The science in the 100 white papers, most of it would really deserve implementation. Unfortunately, life is what it is and affordability is what it is. We had read that there's recommendations that really span topics from the solar systems to the very early universe. So again, a very balanced program, a very ambitious program. And we see that for the next 20 and 30 years, there will be a very bright future for the generation to come. As I say, I'll certainly be long retired if I am alive at all when the last mission in this lot will fly. So we are really building the future for the younger members of the audience, whom I really invite to look forward to working on those teams. And thank you for your attention.
Fabio, thank you for that wonderful presentation. And it's always quite shocking when we're talking about missions for 2050. When the Voyage 2050 document came out, I thought, wow, I remember reading the Cosmic Vision document, which seems like 5 minutes ago. And now we're moving on to this next phase. And it's a real demonstration of these long-term missions and how we all have to work together in order to make that happen, so that we're spanning across the career stages and getting everybody involved in order to make those happen into the future. So thank you for that fantastic presentation. You noted, I mean, obviously I pick up on BEPI because I'm involved in BEPI, but you noted that as an example of a fantastic international collaboration between the European Space Agency, obviously, and Japanese partners, JAXA. Is that sort of model a priority for ESA going forwards for missions, and or maybe how do you balance between an ESA only mission and where you need or want to bring in partnerships?
Thank you, Emma. That's a very, very good, important question, and one which is very close to my heart. I am a very strong believer in international collaboration. Bluntly, we in ESA, we in Europe started doing space science thanks to NASA reaching out. I'll be very blunt. This was well before certain myself or yourself were active. I think we were in school or not even that. So I think international collaboration is in the DNA of space science. Researchers are absolutely global. So all our missions are open to international collaboration. Sometimes, they don't raise the interest of partners. Guy's been an example, is European only, but not because it was, if you want, a cautious decision, we'll close that out, but rather because, okay, there was no interest for a number of reasons from partners. But, JUICE as US and Japanese participation. The same applies to Athena, and LISA has a strong US involvement. Maybe Japan will join in the future. So this is a model that we want to apply to all our missions. All our missions are open for partnership. The large missions will be European-led. Those are European flagships. There is a statement there, but it does not mean that they are close to international collaboration. And frankly, I see what we're doing with China, for example. You know very well the researchers have continued to talk even in the darkest days of the Cold War. I think, as a scientist, I strongly feel we have a duty to reach out, to maintain links, to allow let me be a bit arrogant and say what hopefully are the most illuminated segments of our societies to continue talking across political divides. I see that as an important task we have.
Absolutely, I agree totally, Fabio. Thank you for answering that question. A quick one before we move on. Do you think that ESA will ever develop its own launch system for astronauts?
That's it's a political decision, and I see this comes from Robert. It's a very political decision. Man-rated launchers are expensive, and of course it can be done. There isn't any specific, let's say, challenge that Europe wouldn't be able to do. On the contrary, we're building the service module for the Orion US capsule, so all the elements are in place. We're building very performing rockets. So the real, I'm turning the question around and not giving an answer. I realize it, Robert. It will depend on whether there is political interest, because manned spaceflight is actually political. There is a huge prestige component, which far trumps any prestige that one gets from space science, I'm sorry to say, but I'm being realistic. So it is a political decision. If our paymasters, our ministers will decide that this is key for Europe's soft power, this may happen. There is no, let's say, technical snag, but let's not be shy. This would be a very expensive exercise. Feasible, but would need resources.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much, Fabio. That was fantastic. And I'll see you shortly for the broader panel discussion. Thank you. And finally, then we're going to move to a presentation from Dr. James Endicott, who is representing the Space Academic Network. Thanks, James. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Emma, and I'm delighted to be on the panel. I'd very much like to be in an auditorium, seeing the audience. It's very nice to engage with the audience rather than speaking to the void, but also because I hope there might be a bit of air conditioning. It's a trifle hot here. Anyway, my talk is about the Space Academic Network and concludes with one of the initiatives, a bit of detail about one of the initiatives we're putting forward as an idea, a proposal for funding for the benefit of the wider space research community. So I'll just take a few minutes to introduce you all to what we do and who we are for the benefit of those who don't know us. So SPAN is a recognised voice for academic space research in the UK, and we principally covered science and exploration, Earth observation, technology and engineering, and data and analysis. And as we've heard today, and many of us are aware, the UK aims to be a science superpower, and our interest in that are around the space science superpower piece. The UK is a space science superpower, but how we maintain, grow, or protect that status is of key importance. And within the UK, UK industry has a very strong voice with government. And over the last few years, we've built up SPAN to be that recognised voice for UK government. So we're starting to provide a role or a voice for space science academics in the UK. But it's a journey. So just a bit of background, we represent 39 universities and 8 centres or labs in the UK. So this is through our membership, which is numbering close to 200 active scientists and engineers. So we have coverage across the UK. And we're structured with a board. So on our board, we have representatives of some of the key funding councils in UKRI, some of the advisory groups of the agency, and we also have representatives from universities that support and co-fund SPAN. Below the board, we have the working groups, which are open to any career researcher at any level. And actually one benefit of everything moving online is I think these have become even more accessible due to the ease of just dipping into a meeting rather than having to give up a day to travel to a venue. Anyway, so our main working groups reflect the main areas that SPAN represents, but as we've been growing, we started to establish new areas. So for example, we have a focus group on position, navigation and timing, and we're looking at the formation of working groups devoted to life and physical sciences and also in governance and law. In terms of our stakeholders in the space sector, so we engage with the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy in UKRI, the Space Agency, who are our main sponsor. We're sponsored by the Growth Directorate of the Space Agency. We interact strongly with the SUN, so it's the Space Universities Network, which focuses on training and teaching. And as I mentioned, the government research centres, and then several other key bodies of the space sector, such as DSTL, Met Office, the ESA Member States Office, Royal Societies, UK Space, the trade body. And then there's this organisation called the Space Growth Partnership, which is primarily looking to help support the growth of the space sector, and SPAN provides a representation of academia on that body. So in our role as providing that kind of voice to government on behalf of the community, we essentially have a number of priorities or asks of government to help support us. So we're asking for improved coordination between space academics and other stakeholders around policy and strategy. We're also strongly in support of ESA, the route to doing these grand international missions. The huge opportunities offered by ESA are very important to our community. These science missions cannot really be shouldered by a nation alone. We are keen to secure more international space research, bilaterals or multilaterals, and very importantly, it's strongly felt by the community that there's a need for multi-year fiscal policies. This annualized funding that we see through the Space Agency, but also through parts of the funding councils in parts of their schemes, is very difficult to manage for space missions, for large-scale infrastructure. I imagine Mark and others in SDFC will know that experience the challenges of trying to plan and manage things that evolve on the timescale of decades when your funding goes from year to year. And then behind these sort of more general sort of goals or requests of government to help the space academic community grow and thrive, we have some specific proposals which we really think would bring benefit to the community. So the first of these is a national small science satellite initiative, which I'll go on to detail on the next slide. And we have other ideas on proposals such as technology hubs, where this would foster collaborative research between industry and academia. So sort of marrying up a bit of market pull from industry with some of the innovation and ideas that are generated from lower level technology research and more broadly science. And we're also behind and supportive of a skills initiative for the space sector, because we recognize that within the space sector there's a broad range of very highly skilled people needed across both hardware and software and all aspects. And we're behind sort of the skills initiative there. There's being championed by the Space Agency and also through the Space Partnership. And we've made our own proposals that are additive to the development of skills and people and training. So UK SciSats, what is it? It's a proposal for a national small science satellite program. We have we've proposed that it would be a ramp up to about £25 million per year. And within that scope, we think that the UK could fund a series of small satellite missions. And by small, I mean something up to a class of about 100 or 200 kilograms. But it could all the way go down to picosatellites scale. We've developed this idea through engagement with the community. So in early 2020, we ran a call for mission ideas, and across a fairly small sample from a sample from the community, we got 70 ideas that came in, and this sort of shaped the program into being about much more than just say CubeSats, to actually requiring, there was a community need for some larger satellite platforms enable to do some missions that would require more resources, for example. And we're interested in this for a number of reasons. So first and foremost, in my mind, is that it's an opportunity for new science and new technology development. So within the community, there's a strong feeling that there's limited opportunities or insufficient opportunities to develop those ideas. So say early breadboarding ideas, proof of concept type work. So we'd see this funding or this program establish a funnel of activity, essentially, sort of funding early phase development of concepts and ideas, and then a down select to development of missions and implementation. It sort of mirrors how, say, like the ESA science program might work, where there's a call of mission for mission ideas, and they're down selected within a budgetary envelope. For UK government, they see this as being positive because of the high return on investment that R&D has in the space sector. We think this would be additive to enhancing the national capability. So sort of developing skills and competencies in payloads, but right the way through a kind of mission cycle, through to the operations and the data analysis and development of expertise in those areas. And that links on naturally to sort of training people. I think through these short cycle programs that are on a much smaller scale, rather than sort of waiting on a decade timescale for an opportunity to launch your mission, we hope that this will increase the cadence of missions for the UK and provide opportunities for early career searchers to build up their experience. And those early career researchers working in tandem with more experienced staff would then go on to become the future leaders in the space sector, be that in civil space missions in the UK, in the defence area, working in other parts of government, or hopefully going on to lead missions under, ESA's umbrella. We also think that this sort of funding at sort of the wide end of the funnel would support and be additive to developing international partnerships. So being able to say that the UK has a number of sort of advanced and well-defined mission opportunities should facilitate partnerships with other nations at all scales in their sort of experience in space. Through this, we also envisage some strong knowledge exchange with industry, but also industry acting as a supplier into the academic sector. So there'll be an opportunity for industry where the UK government acts as a bit of an anchor customer. And I've mentioned the strong leadership in future missions. So just on the figure on the bottom right there, it was the outputs of the call for mission ideas we had, where it was across all sciences that you can do from or in space, space weather, for example, Earth observation, astronomy, astrophysics, and so forth, but also technology and the science that goes into those technologies. So just go on to my final slide. So just in summary, SPAN is a recognised voice for the UK space community. Space sciences across the piece are already strong in the UK, but are at risk of decline with sort of the flat funding scenario we see in some instances. And we also see the sort of rise in investment of other nations in the space sciences. So we call for more support for both national and ESA science initiatives. And just the final point is that SPAN relies on voluntary contributions from the community, and so I welcome people who are interested in supporting SPAN to make themselves known. And we, as I said earlier, we have a sort of open door policy to career researchers, and you're all very welcome to support and be part of the community. And on that point, I'll end. Thank you.
Fantastic, James. Thank you so much for telling us about this important work. It's really good to hear about the Space Academic Network's work at this particular session. I think that's been really helpful. I was pleased to hear you mention about the early phase technology development as well. I mean, as we know, that can be an issue in terms of gaining funding to support early phase technology development. And I did notice that was something that Mark Thomson had mentioned specifically in his talk as well. So maybe that's something that we can pick up in our panel. Now, I think in the interest of time, we've got just over 20 minutes. So I think it would be good to bring everybody on now, and we can begin our panel discussion. Thank you all so much for your presentations. Really fantastic to hear everything that you've had to say. And I've just been reflecting on some of the broader themes that we've seen coming through in your presentations, and also trying to keep up with some of the questions coming through as well. So I've tried to gather a few questions for us into those topics. I think we've seen a bit of discussion around sustainability, which is on everybody's minds, appropriately so, diversity, also international partnerships, and something which I've sort of termed agility, in the sense that the way that we work and the way that we are spending our budgets, and that's sort of reflecting on a couple of things that that you've said in your talk. So first of all, and excuse me, because I'm looking in two places, reading questions and picking up new ones coming through. So in terms of sustainability, Mark, if it's okay, I'm going to direct this towards you initially, but perhaps I think it's a broader question for anybody that would like to chip in. The question is STFC going to build carbon budgets into its grants to get universities to do the right thing and help tackle the climate emergency?
Yeah, very, very good question. Something like that won't happen at STFC level. It would have to happen at UKRI level. Could well happen in the near future. I don't know at the moment. To some extent, we are already doing that with some other initiatives. For example, I talked about the infrastructure fund. One of the criteria for the infrastructure selection, the criteria for selection for the infrastructure fund was environmental sustainability. And that doesn't mean it's net zero. It just means, have you made it as sustainable as possible? So I think that's the direction things are going in. When that will reach on kind of grants to universities, I don't know. But yeah, one could see that happening.
That's great, Mark. And I hope that's something that, for example, the RAS can help with the work that we are doing on sustainability. We have a new working group which Robert Massey and I have been leading, looking at this, and maybe that's an area where we can help by writing to UKRI, for example, to help have that pressure, I think, also on the universities and the employers that we need to look at this in this particular way. I don't know if anybody else would like to come in on that point of sustainability at this stage. Feel free to just unmute and come in if you have anything you'd like to say.
I mean, Emma, perhaps I could. I mean, I would just support what Mark said, and I think, you know, our universities are all looking at this very, very closely, and I think our astronomy community have been quite at the vanguard of actually the quantitative information of looking at our carbon footprint of observatories, of our flights to conferences, and I think that this RAS NAM is a great exemplar of how we can use technology to really transform how we engage, and so that when we do in-person engagement, we have a really clear idea of why and how we're doing that. And, you know, the pandemic isn't over, and it won't be the only pandemic. So I think we really do have to capture what's worked, what we've learned from this, what hasn't worked. And I think, you know, my biggest call would be that we think really carefully about the wider inclusivity that this kind of technical transformation has allowed for us, who it may have excluded, who it's added inclusion for, and not just to flip back to our default, oh, you know, everything's over, we'll go back to the way we were before. We would love to be in a non-pandemic world, but actually we'd like to be in a more progressive future. Thank you.
Thanks, Carole. Would anybody else like to add anything there? I would just add that I completely agree from the RAS perspective. Again, it's something we've been talking about, how we have benefited from being able to work remotely. It's been challenging in some ways, but there have been these benefits of connecting in this way that we're doing now, and it's how we continue that good practice into the future. And learn how to do things like hybrid meetings, which I think is where the real challenges will begin. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a topic more widely around budgets. So I'm going to aim this now towards perhaps Carole initially, and then again, more widely, please do step in if you would like to contribute. The question is, how is the government strategy to be a science superpower reconciled with the less than flat cash funding, for example, for UKRI?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, I think what I would say is we are in incredibly financially challenging times, and that's being felt across the whole of government. And the fact that science and technology is an up arrow is a key priority for government, I think, is something to celebrate. And I think that came across very much in Mark's remarks, and the incredible management that STFC have done with those budgets. The fact that we have all of these new opportunities to manage that tight budget in such a clever and agile way that's given so many opportunities to our community. I mean, in my career, I've seen times where, you know, we've had no flexibility in the community whatsoever. We've been told we would not be able to be part of major international infrastructures. We've had no money for permanent positions, for postdocs, for students. So I'm feeling quite old thinking back through some of the crises that our community has lived through, and some people on, you know, in this community will remember those. So, you know, real hats off to STFC for managing that, and also for working so creatively across UKRI. And if you think about the data science PhDs that were, you know, that were secured by STFC in that wider bid a few years ago, you know, we have that science that when we orientate it to fit with government priorities and mission-driven science, we've got such a diversity on the table. We can really win those components for our community. So I also see, you know, really strong engagement, and Professor Dame Otterlyn Laser, who obviously is the CEO of UKRI, I mean, she's a fantastic leader. She's got lots of great ideas about how to, you know, continue to support our community and continue to evolve UKRI, which itself is quite a new organisation. And she has, you know, very good connections in with government. So I think we're all on the same side, but we're just juggling different things. And to make that case to Treasury, you know, obviously Sir Patrick Vallance has been a champion throughout all of this, not just in terms of science funding to our discovery-led science, but our mission-driven science, and also making that relevant to policy teams and ministers who may not necessarily know everything that goes on in our communities, bringing that to the fore and really showing the impact. I think, you know, we've actually got a really positive story given the huge financial challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, thank you, Carole. Anything?
Yeah, I mean, can I just add to that? I mean, I think Carole's absolutely right. It was an incredibly tough spending review, and a lot of areas in government received very significant cuts. The main impact on UKRI was that, you know, loss of ODA actually was one of the big parts of it, and that's kind of a broader policy decision. So, to some extent, actually, UKRI's budget was protected, and in fact, there was an injection of money at quite late in the stage, because I think government recognised what was on the table at the late stage was going to cause problems for UK science, and it responded. So I think, you know, taking the context, very, very tough spending round last time. So I think the proof of the pudding will be the next spending review, the coming spending review, because that's the one that sets hopefully will set the long-term ambition.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Mark. So I'd like to just move to a sort of more partnership-related discussion just briefly. I'm just keeping my eye on the time. We've got lots of questions that we can go through. Fabio, I wondered if I could come to you perhaps and just ask about how you see the future UK involvement in the European Space Agency, given the challenges that we've been dealing with over the last few years, and obviously clearly committed to invest in science with the European Space Agency, and also the relationship between the European Commission and ESA with the associated countries.
It's a complicated question you're asking. That would, you know, a proper response would require much more time that is available. So let me pick a couple of things. First of all, let me limit myself to the science program. And the reason I'm doing this is that the science program is very special in ESA. It's the mandatory program, which means all member states contribute per definition. So to a certain extent, any difference of view, different positions that there may be with the European Commission are unlikely to affect the science program. The UK is a founding member of the agency. The UK has been a very active member of the science program, very active contributor to the science program to date, and we see no reason for which this should change in any way. The other peculiarity of the science program is the fact that it is always a partnership between ESA and the member states, who do supply payloads, who do supply scientists, I would say, who do the scientific analysis and so forth. So none of the missions that we have done, that we are doing and will do would be a success without a very strong national involvement. And the UK has certainly been at the forefront on a number of areas, certainly very strong involvement in building payload. An amazing return, I would say way above the fair share in terms of scientific return, a number of papers published. So from that point of view, certainly there isn't any lack of capacity in the country. So we certainly look forward to continuing and extending this. Of course, for this to happen in the model we have, there needs to be adequate national funding to the provision of payloads, to the scientific exploitation and so forth. This is a national issue, which, of course, we as ESA can't enter into what's effectively a national debate, but it is a necessary condition for this, I would call it, amazing scientific return that UK has had from its membership in ESA and in the science program to be extended in the future. So you've seen the opportunities. I can only encourage the UK community to continue exploiting, be involved in those opportunities, and generate the amazing returns that have been visible up to now.
Thanks, Fabio. That's really fantastic to hear. And just touching back on the question that I asked you, or the point that you made in your presentation around technology challenges relating to the Voyage 2050 missions. You cut out slightly, but you were talking about the affordability of those missions and how the technology challenges that were driving that. And it just occurred to me that, of course, those technology challenges can drive perhaps the decision for ESA to involve various international partners. But another way of looking at that is that we can solve technology challenges through international collaboration. And I think that's something that is, very clearly coming through from all of your presentations. Okay, so just switching across to a slightly different question. This is coming to Carole, please, from Nicholas Walton, and it's around Horizon Europe. So the UK is in the process of associating to Horizon Europe. Is the funding secured for the full Horizon Europe period, 2021 to 2027? And is this in addition to baseline BEIS research funding?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. That's a good question. Thanks to Nick for that. So I would just say that the UK has agreed to participate in the whole of the Horizon Europe programme except the European Innovation Council Fund. As Mark said, we are going through a spending review at the moment, and so BEIS budgets will be set in the autumn. The one thing that I would like the community to understand is that the government has committed to those 7 years of Horizon Europe Association, but are looking very closely at the community engagement, because it's very much that we get back what we put in or we overspend. And the one thing that we've seen as CSAs across Whitehall, we've been working very closely on this for the last 3 years behind the scenes to really make the case to ministers, because it's not obvious that, beyond an ideological connection with Europe, that it's good value for money. And that was really the strong conversation that we had to bring evidence to. And so one of the real concerns and challenges for us is the drop-off that we've seen in applications as we were coming close to Brexit. And as an academic, I can understand that. We were watching the press, you could see everything happening in the political sphere. As Fabio said about, continuing to talk across political, areas, we go below that political radar and think about what are our science partnerships, how important are our relationships and our networks across the whole of Europe. And I would just encourage the community to use it or lose it. You must put in those applications. We need that data to give to ministers and say, look at the strength of our community, our engagement with that programme and the success that we have in winning those bids. And we do win those bids. So please go into that with full confidence. If you're not getting the support at your university, knock on your Vice-Chancellor's door and say, we need our professional services support in this. I know many universities have got some really good support in there. Do get onto the bulletin from the UK Research Office. They send out nightly bulletins saying, here are all the calls, here's how to engage with them. And if you haven't engaged before, work with people who do, because it is a fantastic programme. But it isn't a foregone conclusion. If it doesn't look as though it's important to the UK community, then Treasury will rightly interpret that as we're not interested and we can do something else with the money.
That message is loud and clear. Thanks, Carole. Certainly something that I've been pushing locally at Leicester, and I think that due to messages like yours coming through, that I hope that is getting out, and this is a great way of doing that in this session now. So thank you for that. I'm conscious of a few minutes left, so I'd like to just move on a little bit to talk about early career scientists, if that's okay. We've had a few questions. Some of them will be fairly short and quick, and then perhaps some more for us to think about. So if it's okay, Mark, I'm coming back to you on the status of the Future Leaders Fellowships. You mentioned round 6, which I think I understand is the last round. I'm not sure if you're able to say any more about whether there's an update on any future rounds for that fellowship.
I mean, this is the last round under the money that was given to UKRI effectively when it was set up. There's a desire to continue. I mean, there's clearly a desire to invest in skills and invest in talent, and that's a desire at government level, but UKRI reflects that. I think all of the executive chairs would like to see something like FLF continue, but that has to be funded through the spending review. And so I'm sure there will be there will be a piece in the spending review around funding. I'll use the word talent, and it'll be both early career researchers, but actually maybe I would very much like to see a broader interpretation of talent that extends to technically skilled people, technicians, that support system. So going even broader than the FLFs, but I think something like the FLFs will be certainly will be a high priority for UKRI as we go into the spending review. But again, I can't guarantee what will come out of the spending review.
Of course,
I think it's broadly being viewed as a very successful scheme, and pretty flexible actually. And it's in terms of funding, just flexible funding, not too many constraints on the applications either. And so it's not just research; it's research and innovation. So I think it's been viewed very well, and it's all going to be down to the outcome of the spending review. We will make the best case we can.
Thanks, Mark. So there's a question that came through, and I'm just going to read it exactly as it was worded. Speaking as a British ECR, early career researcher, the UK becomes less attractive every day, both personally and professionally. Does the panel think that the UK is facing a brain drain? And if so, what can be done about it? So I think that speaks again to this question of things like fellowships and opportunities, and potentially, one thing that was on my mind was a sort of early career support, and I think that's something that Mark's nodding used to exist in the system for STFC, and then no longer does. So maybe that's an area where we can improve what's on offer. But I'm interested to hear any thoughts that anyone would like to chip in.
I mean, Emma, if I may pick that up,
Please.
I mean, I think we're very clear, we're very keen to hear experiences of early stage career researchers. The government's clear that talent is at the core of delivering on the science and technology and innovation strategies that we have. And I'm hoping that the people and culture strategy that will come out tomorrow hopefully will help to address some of that. I think, we've looked at some of the practicalities. So, for example, the visas, which I think has been well received, that may not yet have filtered to the front line, but hopefully will. I don't think there is a brain drain. I mean, we see this in many countries, particularly across Eastern Europe, again, work that I've done within government. And I think we do think in terms of brain circulation. We are a global science science community, and I certainly benefited from working in the United States when I was an early stage career researcher. So I think it's about building up those talent pipelines, the collaborations, where can you best do your science. But I think, as Mark alluded to, the technicians' commitment, as my other hat on as president of the Science Council, those diverse pathways are something that is very close to my heart. And I know that we hold the register for all of those learned and professional bodies that are members of the Science Council. We hold the register for the registered science qualification, the registered science technician qualification, and the chartered scientist. That fits with a broader sense of code of conduct. It goes back to workplace culture, and it goes to celebrating that diversity of talent and skills that come together to make all of the missions that we've heard about today and all of the science projects possible. So I think, again, we need to look more broadly and get out of that very narrow academic view and that single pathway to success. I mean, I'm very keen that we have that broad landscape and that we can support all of those careers, both nationally and internationally.
Thanks, Carole.
Can I just add very briefly? I think, the fellowships question is an interesting one. I think our fellowship offering in the UK at the moment is very strong. In fact, assuming something like FLS go along, the actual numbers have gone up massively. But I think the thing that we need to do to make sure we attract and retain early career researchers is actually make the whole environment more vibrant. And the only way we're going to do that is actually invest in the science base. So it's not so much about individual fellowships. It's about the ability for young, all career stages scientists to actually develop new projects and have access to funding to do new things. And we all know things are very tightly constrained at the moment. And so I think it's putting that money into the whole ecosystem, just investing in the core science budgets of the UK. That will make us more attractive because we'll basically be doing more.
Thanks, Mark. Those are really useful comments, and I think the comments around the environment, absolutely right. A more welcoming research environment, of course, is also very helpful, including one which is diverse and representative of wider society as well. And I think that's something that we've talked about previously, and it's something that I think we're all thinking about in terms of what steps we actually need to take in order to improve that situation in our organisations. I think that's really important. And actually, when the RAS responded to the Common Science and Technology Committee recently on the UK space strategy, one of the points that was made was that the space strategy should include a diversity plan, working with the space and astronomy community to tackle that imbalance. And the failure really to recruit talented people irrespective of their background. So I think that's something that will really help with all of this. So anybody else would like to make any comments on this topic? Fabio, yes, please.
If I may, as most likely, I believe the only expat in the panel, the only person living in a different country from my nationality, I can only observe that up to now, the UK has been amazingly successful in attracting young talent from everywhere in Europe. I would say everywhere in the world, not only in Europe. And that certainly, if I can make an observation, has been a huge contribution to its academic success. And not because there aren't enough good researchers in the UK, but because I think it was Carole who said that it's not a question of brain drain, but brain circulation, which I completely subscribe to. I think that we are unfortunately seeing a combination of factors, which is certainly for European researchers related to Brexit, combined with the pandemic, which has introduced a very high amount of friction that is hampering the circulation. And that, again, some of it is travel restrictions, which are simply related to the pandemic, and some of the challenges combined with more difficult mutual recognition of paperwork, bureaucracy, and etc. with Europe certainly is introducing a friction. And I personally would be, very sad to see that the attractor role of the UK academic, scientific, technical, engineering community, and it's not only again academic. Again, I believe was Mark was making a point about the importance of also technically skilled people and etc. etc. The same applies to UK industry, which I believe in aerospace at least, which is the domain I am familiar with, as a very multinational workforce. Again, an amazing source of richness, skill, and talents. So I certainly would be very sad to see that this combination of factors will diminish this in the future. And for early career researchers, I think that that's a particularly important issue because, of course, their funding is more limited, and therefore, unfortunately, it is true that money solves many problems. And for the younger people, this may be a more significant challenge. So this is from, let's say, an external perspective, which is, of course, different from the internal one.
Thank you, Fabio. Really, really fantastic comments. I really appreciate your input from that perspective. I'm going to have to wrap this up because we've come to the end of our time. It's been an absolutely fantastic session. Thank you all so much for coming along and for your contributions and for this really great discussion. We've touched very briefly on a number of topics, which I think these will be ongoing conversations that we will have. Can I just ask the panelists to take a look at Slack, if you are able to do so, after the session ends? I think there are more questions in there under the hashtag for the plenaries channel. So you may like to go in there and answer any more questions coming up. But other than that, just to thank you all, and thanks to everyone for coming along to this fantastic session today. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.